For me, Tijjani Reijnders is a hand-in-glove fit for this team and for the Pep Guardiola system. He is a perfect ball-carrying midfield who's going to contribute goals from deep as well, which he did for Milan last season.
We're going to start with Manchester City, off to a winning start, beating the Moroccan side Wydad 2-0. Phil Foden, Jérémy Doku with the goals for City. They also had Rico Lewis sent off late on. Tijjani Reijnders and Rayan Cherki made their debuts. Chris, what did you make of City's performances? Did they live up to expectations? I mean, they were expected to win this game pretty comfortably, weren't they?
It was a fairly experimental side. We were talking about how this side didn't really line up with an out-and-out striker. Erling Haaland came on in the second half, and Rodri came on in the second half as well. So it was kind of a makeshift midfield as well. But we saw a lot of the new players come in. Tijjani Reijnders, who I thought looked really good in that midfield, gliding and carrying, which is what we're used to seeing in Milan. And I think that's one of the big things that Pep Guardiola wanted to do with this side, is to turn them into a bit more of a dribbly kind of team, to carry the ball forward and really make defensive sweat a little bit. But I still think it's very much a work in progress. I think we saw Cherki as well, who had some moments of flair, some moments where he gave the ball away. I think we're seeing a little bit more of a risk-taking Manchester City in possession, but I also think that they spent large portions of today's game managing. I think when we talk about the European sides and the fixture congestion, the number of games, you wonder when they might kind of go into second or third gear and just try and see out a game, which I think is what we saw today. We saw a City side that were trying to have a minute to 2 minute long periods of possession where, yeah, not much was going on, but we're managing and we're keeping the game in front of us. So I don't think this was a brilliant City performance. I wouldn't watch this and go, man, they're on their way to going on winning this thing, but they got the job done that they needed to get done.
A bit more in terms of the debutants. Aït-Nouri, he was on the bench, but he didn't come on, so we didn't see him. But we saw, as you said, Reijnders and Cherki play their part. Did you see how Pep Guardiola is going to utilise them in the system that he likes to play at City?
I did. I still think that Cherki is an interesting one, because he has talked about being the same player that he was at Lyon in a Manchester City shirt, which is much more of a maverick, which is much more of a creative kind of player. What everyone says that Pep Guardiola kills in players, Rayan Cherki kind of represents as an individual. So I am fascinated to see how that plays out. And so I do think that there were moments where he gave the ball away by taking risks up the pitch, which is kind of what we think is the thing that Pep Guardiola least desires. He doesn't want to see his side give away the ball. And so I wonder if he's going to be able to kind of figure out that balance, Cherki, because we've talked about how Jack Grealish became a much different player under Guardiola. He was much more of an attack-minded go-at defenders, and then he ended up becoming more possession-based. You wonder what that balance is. For me, Tijjani Reijnders is a hand-in-glove fit for this team and for the Pep Guardiola system. He is a perfect ball-carrying midfield who's going to contribute goals from deep as well, which he did for Milan last season. Incredibly comfortable and silky in possession, but also pretty solid defensive awareness and ability to press as well. When we look at that sort of ideal midfield, you wonder what that third piece of it is. But you know, it's Rodri as the 6 and Reijnders as kind of an 8, getting forward into that kind of attacking midfield position. Reijnders, for me, I can see him becoming an every game starter. I see him as kind of the heir apparent to what İlkay Gündoğan was for Pep Guardiola. And I remember when Gündoğan first started, I remember kind of thinking, man, I don't know if he satisfies the attacking need for this team. You sort of presume that every player needs to provide attack and thrust and creativity, but Reijnders does a bit of that, but he's also a perfectly solid and balanced central midfield player. So I think from minute one, you can see how this is going to work with Reijnders.
A lot of it for Reijnders as well was confidence, because some of that had been lost, hadn't it, playing for AC Milan, the disappointing season for them collectively. We're talking about new signings, but Rodri back in the team kind of feels like a new signing. Did you see him at and towards his best? Clearly, obviously, the start of the new season is going to be, given the fact that he's coming back from that big injury, where he's really focusing.
Yeah, there are a few ropey bits of possession with him today, and he's still just coming back into it. So I don't have incredibly high expectations, but there is a little bit of a worry for me coming off of winning the Ballon d'Or. On the wrong side of 30, obviously, I think there are players that age differently, but there is a little bit of a concern for me when it comes off of long-term injury. The ACL can be one where sometimes players don't look the same afterwards. So I am a little bit kind of cautious, and I'm keeping an eye on when do we see peak Rodri again. But obviously, once he gets back into the side, it's going to really provide some balance. I thought it was really good we see Phil Foden in the starting 11 to get a goal in the second minute of the game. He actually opened the scoring for them when they won the Club World Cup in the previous iteration after they won the Champions League, and does so again today. I thought Savinho and Doku had good moments, but I still think for Manchester City, to get to where they were in the last several seasons before this one, I do think that a lot of these players that you see in that starting 11 are not ready-made, are not world-class as yet. They need to take steps forward. And so I do think that Savinho on that right and Doku on that left, we know what their talent is. We know that when they go at players, it can be absolutely terrorizing. But I still think there's a level of inconsistency in too many Manchester City players for me to feel like they're going to be favorites to win the Premier League and the Champions League and kind of hold that esteem that they had in the previous era. When you knew Raheem Sterling, Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, Riyad Mahrez, Sergio Aguero, all these incredible players, what they were going to deliver every game. I still don't think we're there with a lot of those main attackers. And obviously for Foden, who was player of the season 2 seasons ago to having a significant drop-off last season, I think it'll be important for him to kind of get going again.
See Marmoush there, he started the game. Haaland was on the bench, but he did come on, so you had them on the pitch at the same time. But I've always felt, particularly at the back end of last season, in this game as well, not always the clearest of connections between these two players. Do you think Pep Guardiola is going to try and find a way to get them both on the pitch all the time, or is he going to just bring in another striker and perhaps add someone else to the mix?
Yeah, I can see Marmoush, if we're kind of talking about profiles in this team, I can kind of see Marmoush in something of a Julian Alvarez role. And Alvarez was kind of talked about as the understudy to Erling Haaland, but you'll recall in his final season at Manchester City, he played 38 Premier League games. There was a role for him all over the pitch, but I do think that places the onus on Omar Marmoush to be a little bit more malleable and work in different positions and not quite have the team built around him in the way that, say, Eintracht Frankfurt would have been last season until he signed for Manchester City. I think Marmoush had that run in the team with Haaland out injured where he was the main man, but ultimately for this thing to work, they have to be complementary. And I agree with you, Adam. I do think that we didn't see enough from them over the course of last season to think that this is a combination, a duo that works flawlessly. And so this is very much a work in progress in my view. I also think Erling Haaland looking like Erling Haaland, it's been some time. It's been some time where, for all the fantasy players out there, you just must have. He's going to score a hat-trick every week. A home against the bottom 5 side in the Premier League, nailed on 2 or 3 goals. He hasn't quite been that level of dominant. I think this is the first time that we're seeing him go through a little bit of a fallow period and have to figure out what his next step is or what his move is, because you don't want to say he's figured out, but I think there's enough tape, there's enough scout out there on him to have an idea of what to do. So I think for Erling Haaland to get back to that level, an admittedly incredibly lofty and high level. This is not common to see Premier League players score 30 or more goals in a season. We saw it from Erling Haaland, but I wonder when he's going to hit that level again.
Just quickly, forgiven for not knowing too much about the Casablancans, Wydad, but they played pretty well, didn't they? They potentially could have got something from this game.
Well, this is the interesting part of the Club World Cup to me, because, yes, in the relative grand scheme of things, Wydad AC coming up against Manchester City, there's no contest. But let's remember that this is a side that dominates the Moroccan League, and this is a side that dominates in continental football in Africa. That's why they're here. These are all continental champions that we're seeing in this tournament. And yes, it is at a higher level, but you have to, it's sort of an interesting mentality. They might be worse on paper than the teams that Manchester City would face, even in the Carabao Cup in the early rounds or the FA Cup in the early rounds. But they have the mentality of champions. They have the mentality of, we can go at these guys. We know that when we play our game, we can beat a lot of teams. Yes, it is in our domestic competition or our continental competition, but they still have that sort of muscle of attacking teams and showing quality. And so I do think they took their moments to counter. There were a few moments today where Manchester City would have had hearts and mouths. There was a player for Wydad that tried to catch the goalkeeper out from the halfway line. There's that level of confidence that you have. And so I think that's what we see in a lot of these games is teams that, yes, while being outmanned, are not necessarily afraid of playing. And I think that's what we saw today from Wydad. So I thought that they gave a really good account to themselves in this game. Sometimes that can come off as patronizing when we're talking about teams that are at such a lower level, but I do think it is worth crediting teams not going out there and losing 9-0 to Manchester City because they can play. They have a good game in their own right.
Yeah, they say winning's an attitude, and when you're used to winning whatever league, that can translate through even against the top teams.